Targeted individuals. Targeted individuals are victims of racism, homophobia, organized stalking, electronic harassment, non-consensual experimentation, and TIs firmly promote neuro rights with data sovereignty, guaranteeing cognitive liberty and mental privacy, and vehemently say no to neo-Nazism. Welcome to this specially created video presentation on targeted individuals, which has been designed to simplify and concisely educate the public on the United Kingdom's government weaponization program.
This weaponization is achieved by the use of advanced radiological technology to psychotronically target innocent civilians all over Britain, which is being conducted under the auspices and umbrella of the UK's Domestic Intelligence Service MI5, and which is supported by both the British Police Force and the UK National Health Service.
For your convenience, this video is accompanied by a more detailed report-style booklet, which is distributed in both printed and electronic PDF document formats, which is fully illustrated to aid easier comprehension. If you're viewing this video online, then the current up-to-date version of the detailed report-style booklet in an electronic PDF document format can be downloaded from the link that has been provided in the description area below this video. You would find it quite beneficial if you can watch this video completely, so that you can obtain a full understanding on how you might be targeted by these psychotronic weapons. So, the methods used to carry out this weaponized psychotronic targeting of civilians is presented very concisely, and has been animated here to aid easier comprehension. In this video, you will learn about the weaponization of government with the following. Find out about the targeted innocent civilian victims, and what they are urgently demanding from the UK government. Learn about the United Nations investigation into government-sponsored psychotronic targeting and torture. Hear about how the British police obstructed a psychotronically targeted victim's complaint to the UK government, preventing his letter and report reaching the UK Prime Minister and other members of Parliament. Learn about the secret smuggling of Nazi German scientists to the USA. These are those who had carried out non-consensual torturous mind control and counterintelligence targeting and experimentation in Nazi German concentration camps, and also about the creation of the Nuremberg Code to govern ethical human research. Find out how the UK intelligence service falsely places innocent civilians on a target watch list, and then arrange the surreptitious fitting up of these victims with psychotronic Brainradio electrode neural interfacing chip implants. Find out how the psychotronic torture of these victims with directed energy neuro weapons are carried out after their psychotronic neural interfacing chip implantation. Find out how the constant non-stop psychotronic surveillance and torture of these victims in their homes and outside are carried out. Learn about how the false medicalization of these victims is carried out by the NHS and its psychiatric services as a smokescreen to cover up these crimes against humanity that are committed under the UK government weaponization program. Be introduced to some of the great conscionable whistleblowers who exposed these government-sponsored torture programs. Find out about your democratic civil and human rights, and about the campaign to end these government-sponsored violations of your human and civil rights.
Who are these targeted individuals in the United Kingdom then? Targeted individuals are victims of government weaponization, who have been selected by our own intelligence agencies, usually who are MI5, GCHQ, and MI6, together with the complicity and cooperation of our police forces and our National Health Service, to unwittingly participate in an experimental remotely influenced and controlled radiological psychotronic mind control and torture program, with non-consensual experimentation. These targeted individuals are used as prototypes on which to test and try out new experimental radiological psychotronic mind control neurotechnology and directed energy weapons technology. The research and development of these radiological psychotronic neurotechnology in the defense industry is usually 30 to 50 years ahead and is more advanced than the commercial and academic sectors. And this advanced defense-related psychotronic neurotechnology is currently worth billions of pounds to the British government. Around 75% of victims do not realize that they have been targeted. This program's modus operandi was originally developed under the American CIA's MK-Ultra project and the American FBI's COINTELPRO program, which was designed to break down the individual and neutralize the person, using psychological, physical and emotional stress. The ultimate goal of this intelligence and defense industry-led program is that, once the technology has been successfully tested and perfected on the many thousands of targeted individuals in the UK, is for it to be eventually deployed en masse across the whole of society to social engineer, brainwash and control the entire population, and enforce conformity from a subconscious level to a conscious level, through the use of psychological tactics of intimidation, fear, blackmail and threats, and thereby silencing any dissent, and therefore maintaining the current status quo for the benefit of the governing elite and powers that be. Generally, left-of-the-center socialists, political activists, dissidents, whistleblowers, intellectuals, independent thinkers, people of color and the LGBT community are some of those who are falsely labeled as subversives that are rocking the boat of the governing elite, and conveniently hence made into the main targets of this program. However, many people are randomly selected. The victim's career along with their family and spousal relationships are usually destroyed as part of the psychological torture that ensues. These targeted individuals are victims of lawfare and are illegally harassed, non-consensually experimented upon, stalked and placed under surveillance. These individual groups refers to themselves collectively as targeted individuals or TIs. This rapidly growing collective group of individuals is the group of people in our population who are voicing the complaints of exposure to electromagnetic and psychotronic technologies meant to alter cognition and physiology. They are fitted with tracking and surveillance devices that read and torment and control their minds, whilst being attacked with electromagnetic weapons that cause terrible pain, voice-to-skull, and Havana syndrome-type anomalous health incidents. Daily, TIs undergo organized stalking, illegal surveillance, non-consensual experimentation and harm from government weaponization. These American FBI COINTELPRO-style British domestic covert counterintelligence and surveillance psychotronic targeting programs, which are operated under the UK government weaponization program, appear to operate like a type of a stay-behind army, carrying out a vigilante-style parallel justice system, following a conflicting precept of guilty until proven innocent and not on the traditional internationally accepted legal foundation of innocent until proven guilty.
Now, let's find out what these targeted individuals and TI groups are campaigning for. These targeted individual group rallies and campaigns are working hard to expose and end the police and intelligence agency-run illegal torture program of targeted individuals in the UK and worldwide, through public awareness, education, and new neuro-rights legislation. Targeted individuals and TI groups are firmly advocating for these changes only through peaceful and non-violent solutions.
The United Nations investigated after receiving a petition and produced a report on torture through their Council on Human Rights. That report, after thorough investigations, found that innocent unsuspecting civilians worldwide were being subjected to the following: state-organized stalking, psychological torture, electronic harassment, and non-consensual experimentation, with the use of advanced psychotronic cyber technology to inflict cruel, inhumane mental and physical suffering.
The United Nations Council on Human Rights asked Professor Nils Melzer to investigate and produce that report on torture. He had taken on the role of the Special Rapporteur on torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment for the United Nations during 2016 to 2022. During his time as UN Rapporteur on torture, Professor Melzer has been a figure with a strong voice defending human rights. He stated at the UN Human Rights Council that governments must show greater commitment to tackle torture at home. He also took a supportive stance on Julian Assange, saying in January 2020 that the treatment of the WikiLeaks founder was politically motivated and persecutory, adding the case is a huge scandal and represents the failure of Western rule of law. And while psychological torture has been recognized as a distinct concept from physical torture for a long time, many governments do not recognize psychological torture as torture, Additionally, Professor Nils Melzer is the Human Rights Chair of the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. He is also a Professor of International Law at the University of Glasgow. Following the publication of the United Nations report, a further 2 detailed reports were produced by one of the victims known as Mr. RG and were submitted to the United Kingdom's government. The first is the main report that is presented in a very detailed and illustrated format in an easy-to-comprehend style, detailing the misuse of the UK domestic intelligence watchlisting process to falsely label and target innocent civilians as subversives and villains, by our own intelligence services together with the complicity and cooperation of our police force and National Health Service. As a form of carte blanche justification and smokescreen for the unwitting non-consensual and clandestine use of these civilians as human guinea-pig subjects. Also, how these innocent falsely watch-listed civilians are then unwittingly used in the research, development and testing of covert psychotronic mass surveillance technologies, covert neurotechnological telemetric communication surgical implants and directed energy weapons for the British defence industry. Additionally, on how these civilian guinea-pig victims are used to supplement the training of intelligence service psychological operatives and field agents, in running an American FBI COINTELPRO style British domestic covert counterintelligence and surveillance program. The second is an additional supplemental report detailing the psychotronic electronic harassment and targeting of the victim Mr. RG for a period longer than the past decade. During this time, he had been non-consensually implanted with a Brainradio type electronic neural communication electrode implant, and then subjected to psychotronic harassment and torture, including being physically burnt by directed energy weapons. The additional supplemental report also details how the British police obstructed Mr. RG's letters of complaint about being targeted to the UK government, preventing his letter and main report reaching the UK Prime Minister and other senior members of the UK Parliament, on not just one but on 3 separate occasions. To gain a historical context, let's take a very brief look at how these technologies came from the Nazi German Peenemünde Army Research Center to being adopted by the American military-industrial complex and NATO. The first 3 sections in the main report outlines how the emergence of modern electronic psychotronic and neuro weaponry came into existence, from its horrific beginnings of being created in the Nazi German Peenemünde Army Research Center and tested in the Nazi concentration and death camps in Germany and Poland, such as Dachau and Auschwitz, under the German Nazi leader Adolf Hitler's regime in the 20th century. Then following on from there, how it's been further developed and perfected into a powerful and terrifying network of electronic radiological weapon of mass population control, by the same inhumane Nazi scientists that were secretly rescued from the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal prosecutions, and transported to the USA by their CIA's covert operations codenamed Project Paperclip and Project 63. These secretly rescued Nazis were then recruited by the CIA and given subsidies to continue their original very same horrific nefarious research, but this time under the auspices of the American government, and they were then implanted into the American military-industrial complex, feeding into the NATO machinery and spreading its tentacles back into Europe, in recent times into the 21st century. It is therefore disappointingly ironic that the upper echelons of our United Kingdom civil service who so vehemently helped fight against the horrors of Nazism during the Second World War in the 20th century, is currently secretly and wholeheartedly embracing this newer, neo version of Nazism and is misguiding our elected government leadership to keep on funding the weaponization of government. With the running a replica of an American FBI parallel justice COINTELPRO type British domestic covert counterintelligence and surveillance program, operated under the instructions of the current far-right-wing elements of the American-style anti-terrorist and intelligence fusion centers of the British version of a military-industrial complex, now in the 21st century.
Following the Nuremberg Tribunal court trial of the Nazi doctors, who were prosecuted for their horrific unethical medical practices, which was held after World War II in the 20th century, a set of ethical research principles for human experimentation were created, which came to be known as the Nuremberg Code. Because of its massive influence on global human rights, the Nuremberg Code is considered to be the most important document in the history of clinical research ethics. The 10 points of the Nuremberg Code are as follows. From the 10 points of the Nuremberg Code, one of the most important points is listed as the first item, which states that The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice, without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved, as to enable him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. This latter element requires that, before the acceptance of an affirmative decision by the experimental subject, there should be made known to him the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiment, the method and means by which it is to be conducted, all inconveniences and hazards reasonably to be expected, and the effects upon his health or person which may possibly come from his participation in the experiment. The duty and responsibility for ascertaining the quality of the consent rests upon each individual who initiates, directs, or engages in the experiment. It is a personal duty and responsibility, which may not be delegated to another with impunity. Continuing this brief historical journey, let's look at how the CIA's psychotronic mind control project MK-Ultra evolved from its beginnings in Nazi German concentration camps. As outlined in the main report, the modern electronic psychotronic mind control technology came to be derived from its militarized beginnings in the Nazi German Third Reich, under their leader Adolf Hitler in the 20th century. The Nazis used the Swiss, synthesized drug lysergic acid diethylamide or LSD, for their secret military non-consensual human torturous mind control medical experimentation and research on the unfortunate inmates at the infamous Dachau Nazi concentration camp in Germany. The Nazis wanted to perfect a methodology to break the prisoner's will, using harsh interrogations in the search for a truth drug to extract information, and explore its potential as a biochemical weapon. Many of these inhumane Nazi scientists experimenting on prisoners in concentration camps on mind control research, who were rescued from the Nuremberg trials, and transported to the USA by their CIA's covert operations codenamed Project Paperclip, then carried on their nefarious research which gave birth to Project MK-Ultra, which was the American CIA's notorious brainwashing and psychological torture program that was then directed by Sidney Gottlieb. The now infamous Canadian Dr. Ewan Cameron, who was also the president of the American Psychiatric Association, directed the MK-Ultra's sub-project number 68 for the American CIA, which was designed to break down the individual and neutralize the person, using psychological, physical and emotional torture. This American CIA's secret project MK-Ultra, which was began in 1953, still continues secretly to this day, under more refined and modernized undisclosed psychotronic mind control programs, that are operated through American and British military-industrial complexes, which then feed into the NATO machinery, and is spreading its tentacles back into Europe and other parts of the world, in recent times into the 21st century.
Concluding the brief historical journey, let's look at how the American FBI's notorious domestic counterintelligence program, which was referred to as COINTELPRO, in short form, was emulated from the stratagem of the Nazi German Gestapo's similar persecutory Wehrkraftzersetzung operations. The modern incarnation of political civil mind control emerged from the Nazi German Gestapo's Wehrkraftzersetzung operations, under their Führer Adolf Hitler's Third Reich the 20th century, as outlined in the main report. It was later adopted from the Nazi Gestapo and referred to as just Zersetzung by the East German State Security Service known as the Stasi. The American FBI's notorious secret, illegal, and immoral domestic counterintelligence program, known as COINTELPRO, was began by the American FBI under the directorship of J. Edgar Hoover in the mid-20th century, which mirrored the German Zersetzung in style, and was operated as a clandestine unit targeting dissenting individuals and groups, using sabotage to create paranoia and division, by relying on coercion, blackmail or ideological alignment. COINTELPRO was designed to infiltrate, disrupt, discredit, neutralize and silence civil rights leaders, specifically black activists, political dissidents, social justice movements, environmentalists, and protest groups that were perceived as subversive by the intelligence agency-run political police force. At its height of notoriety, COINTELPRO targeted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., anti-Vietnam War protesters, the National Lawyers Guild, women's liberation leaders, students fighting for democracy, and the American Native Indian movement. The COINTELPRO illegal tactics included forging correspondence, planting anonymous phone calls and letters, illegal wiretapping and surveillance, and using informants to provoke violence and destroy reputations. COINTELPRO has been modernized and continues to this day as American and British-run counter-intelligence programs that are operated through military-industrial complexes, feeding through the NATO machinery to spread its tentacles throughout Europe and other parts of the world, in recent times into the 21st century.
In conclusion to the brief historical journey, let's also look at how the American FBI's notorious domestic counterintelligence program known as COINTELPRO was then emulated by the British law enforcement and intelligence agencies. British Security Acts legislate Security Service MI5, Secret Intelligence Service MI6, Government Communications Headquarters GCHQ, and the National Crime Agency to work in partnership and direct support of one another's schemes. Mind control psychological operatives, generally known as PSYOPs, employed by these agencies are no exception to this rule and have the full use of government services at their disposal, including the UK's largest police force, which is the Metropolitan Police Force. The Special Branch, which is the covert political wing of the Metropolitan Police, had created a covert division called the Special Demonstration Squad known as the SDS, which used COINTELPRO-style counterintelligence operations to target groups spanning the entire scope of the British political left, as well as black justice campaigns and environmental activists. The SDS activities were mainly coordinated from the outset by Britain's main domestic intelligence agency MI5. The SDS program was operated as a secret political police, and these various police intelligence units were commonly known as the SDS spy corps. This unit of the police actively engaged in infiltration, spying on and sabotage of left-of-the-centre political parties and popular civil rights movements. Spy corps were deployed into and reported on a wide range of activist groups, including those involved in social, environmental, justice and political campaigning. Some of those targeted by the spy corps include the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, London Greenpeace, the Socialist Workers' Party, the Anti-Nazi League, Anti-Apartheid Movement, the Anti-Internment League, the Independent Labour Party, the Troops Out Movement, the Young Liberals, the Women's Liberation Front, the Gay Liberation Front and the LGBT rights group Outrage. The organised working class was another primary target of the SDS, and the trade unions targeted include Unison, the Fire Brigades Union, the Communication Workers Union and even the National Union of Teachers. Most of these targeted groups were entirely non-violent, indicating the political nature of the spy corps surveillance. Almost all of the British spy corps known targets were from the broad political left. The SDS spy corps had engaged in agent provocateur behavior, or tried to direct non-violent groups into taking violent action. Some of these police officers had stolen the identities of dead children in order to avoid their true identities from being found out. Almost everyone to the left of the Labour Party seems to have been targeted. Indeed, even the Labour Party itself was not exempt from the British Political Police Squad SDS spy corps campaign of surveillance and sabotage. Over the past years, the SDS spy corps activities were transferred to an undercover domestic extremism unit known as the National Public Order Intelligence Unit, which then in turn transferred its functions over to the counter-terror police force fusion centres that are now ultimately reporting to the new NATO Intelligence Fusion Centre, known as the NIFC, located in Molesworth in Cambridgeshire in the United Kingdom. These COINTELPRO-style counterintelligence programs has been modernised and is continued today, as both joint American and British-run counterintelligence programs that are operated through the NATO Intelligence Fusion Centre machinery to spread its tentacles throughout Europe and other parts of the world, in recent times in the 21st century.
In summary then, let's look at how modern domestic counterintelligence programs fused with modern electronic psychotronic political mind control have evolved from their beginnings in Nazi Germany and being adopted in modern America, and then being introduced to modern Britain through its NATO membership. In the previous sections it was shown how COINTELPRO and MK Ultra came into existence, from their beginnings under the Nazi German Third Reich. In current times COINTELPRO and MK Ultra has been upgraded, computerized and weaponized into a modern system of political control. Modern domestic counter-intelligence programs are based on an amalgam of COINTELPRO and MK-Ultra, creating a fusion of total political and social mind control. These new modern domestic counter-intelligence programs have been refined into a far more sophisticated incarnation that uses organized stalking, digital surveillance, electronic harassment, psychological warfare, and societal engineering to target individuals and entire communities. The intelligence agency run invasive surveillance using automated AI-driven psychotronic and electronic communications monitoring, use of rogue mobile cell tower intercepts, and invasive personal information gathering networks, with the disturbing collusion of mental health and medical professionals, has become the machinery and an integral part of the covert suppression of the modern fusion of COINTELPRO and MK-Ultra-based domestic counter-intelligence programs. The daily spying on citizens by our domestic intelligence agencies has become the order of today. Today, corrupt, undemocratic, far-right-wing deep state actors, within senior levels of government, have secretly armed themselves with this governmental weapon of a modern fusion of COINTELPRO and MK-Ultra-based domestic counterintelligence programs. Their use of covert torture, expansive spy network, and spate of criminal activity identify them as some of the most influential and dangerous civil servants functioning in British political arenas today. They have corrupted our civil law enforcement agencies to act as a political police in a military-industrial complex comprising of corporate and governmental alliances, to manipulate narratives eroding democracy and shape modern culture and perception through propaganda and algorithmic control. It has essentially become a secret war on civil rights and political freedom. From gaslighting and workplace sabotage to manipulated common good agendas, the fusion of COINTELPRO and MK-Ultra-based domestic counter-intelligence programs operate like a type of a stay-behind army, carrying out a vigilante-style parallel justice system that follow a conflicting precept of guilty until proven innocent, and not on the traditional internationally accepted legal foundation of innocent until proven guilty. An is a chilling architecture of influence and control, designed to pacify, polarize, and neutralize dissent. This modern fusion of COINTELPRO and MK-Ultra-based domestic counter-intelligence programs are secretly operated through American-style intelligence agency-run fusion centers, feeding into the NATO machinery and spreading its tentacles throughout Europe and other countries around the world through the Five Eyes Global Intelligence Sharing Alliance comprising of the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, in recent times now in the 21st century.
Back to our current times, let's take a look into the false watchlisting and non-consensual use of civilians as targeted human guinea pigs.
The chart shown illustrates the American watchlist screening processes as an example depicting the collection, nomination, and consolidation activities of information relating to watchlisted targeted individuals. The UK process is not much different to the American process. It must be highlighted that the UK's domestic intelligence watchlisting processes are being misused for falsely listing innocent civilians as subversives and villains, as a form of carte blanche justification and smokescreen for the unwitting non-consensual use of these civilians as human guinea pig subjects. These unfortunate unwittingly watchlisted innocent civilian victims are then clandestinely used for the research, development, and testing of covert psychotronic surveillance technologies and covert surgical remote neural monitoring capable telemetric implants band-directed energy weapons. These domestic intelligence watchlists are then shared with other Western democratic countries through the use of secret watchlist sharing partnership treaties and NATO and anti-terrorist fusion centers. The United Kingdom has also been actively working to expand information sharing with other countries such as India, to promote greater information exchange and encourage them to do more in updating their watchlists, with the Global Intelligence Sharing Alliance comprising of the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. In order to facilitate the continuance of covert electronic harassment of these watchlisted targeted individuals, should they move to any of those countries. See Section 1 and Section 2 in the main report, which details this.
Let's take a brief look at these miniature neural telecontroller implants for remote radiological telemetry and tracking of targeted individuals. In the example shown, a modern cutting-edge miniature electronic brain radio neural telecontroller technological electrode implant is surreptitiously inserted into the sinus cavity through the nasal passage and implanted into a sedated targeted victim without their knowledge. This type of implant easily facilitates remote neural monitoring and electronic harassment and the use of synthetic telepathy. It should be noted that the Brainradio type chip is the main method used to decode and read the thoughts of the implanted victim, and also to transmit sound to the victim including speech, and to transmit video images and computer-generated visual images to the victim, transmit sensory perception of smells, tastes, touch and tactile sensations, including pain, and other sensory perceptions. Also, the Brainradio type chip can read body temperature variances, heart rate, and sense breathing level and body and muscle movement. Importantly, it can equally transmit and write the same type of information to the victim's brain to force body movement or any of the above-mentioned effects or block it. The Brainradio type electrode chip implant communicates with the outside world by wirelessly transmitting digitally using a microwave radio wave connection to the existing digital mobile and satellite telecommunications network, similar in the way a digital mobile telephone handset does. Additionally, these chips are also produced with built-in GPS tracking capabilities and near-field RFID locating capabilities to track and locate a targeted person anywhere in the world, which is carried out by the assistance of the orbiting global positioning satellite network and the use of small portable handheld tracking and locating devices distributed to field agents who are assigned to follow and monitor that particular targeted person. How this is carried out is fully detailed in Section 2 of the main report under the topic titled, The British Surgical Implant Specialists.
This illustration was originally released by the American Department of Homeland Security's Fusion Center in Washington state, in response to a Freedom of Information Act request, which has been animated and colorized here to aid easier comprehension. It specifies the artificially induced effects on the victim combined with remote neural monitoring and thought-reading feedback by connecting to the victim's Brainradio electronic implant and also with the use of a V2K voice-to-skull type of microwave radiological projection device, with both being simultaneously controlled with the use of transportable psychotronic system control equipment. This is also then combined with the use of electronic directed energy-based neural weaponry, for conducting remote radiological harassment and torture of victims, by state-sponsored operatives employed under the intelligence agency umbrella with assistance from the police force. Now let's look into the effects and conditions that can be artificially induced in the victim by the use of the Psychotronic electronic harassment weapon control system by connecting to the victim's Brainradio electronic implant and also with the use of a V2K voice-to-skull type of Psychotronic, pulse-modulated microwave radiological projection device. Victims hear artificial tinnitus or sensations of ringing in the ears. This is possibly caused by the microwave carrier wave connection to the implanted electrode of the victim. The victim's thoughts are continually read with the use of the victim's Brainradio electrode implant and is then broadcasted to be received by psychotronic radio reception antennas, which forwards this on to the intelligence agency-run supercomputer. It is then narrated by AI software and forward distributed electronically to various intelligence agency customized reception devices running interactive software that has been distributed to their psychological operatives and field agents, who are working with the intelligence agency-run psychotronic targeting program. Induced changes to hearing with both apparent direction of the sound and its volume, and sometimes even its content. When the Brainradio implant in the victim is used to override the natural perception of sound heard by the victim's ear. This causes to misunderstand speech that is heard if words are changed in those sentences as heard by the victim. Being subjected to perceive microwave hearing. This is another method of transmitting sound and it does not require a Brainradio type electrode implant to work. This works by the transmission of sound using a voice-to-skull device to project modulated microwaves directly to the victim's cochlea in the inner ear. This perception of sound can be used to project both noises and actual human speech. It's worth noting that the first unclassified successful transmission of the human voice directly into the skull of a living person was performed by Dr. Joseph Sharp of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in 1974. By transforming a hypnotist's voice using the Lowry silent sound or the Smirnoff scramble methods. This technology was used in the Gulf War. It is possible to hypnotize a targeted victim without the victim being aware, whilst being hidden and leaving no trace evidence to the victim of who the actual perpetrator is. It is also worth noting that the V2K voice-to-skull device does not require a brain radio chip implanted in the targeted person to work. It can be used to project voices and sound to any person or a very closely situated group of people. The same method used to project voice and sound using a similar device can also be used to project smells and tastes to a targeted person or very closely situated group of people without a chip implantation. For this to work as intended by the psychological operatives, both the projecting device and the operative who is manually controlling the device requires to be present within a close range to the targeted person. However, such a projection device can be made to be remotely operated where the operative does not require to be located close to the actual projection device. With the use of this type of microwave radiological projection device, many additional Havana syndrome or anomalous health incident type effects and conditions can be projected by the operatives and induced in a targeted person or very closely situated group of people without a chip implantation. These effects and conditions are causing confusion, causing short-term memory loss, causing an inability to focus, causing brain fog or sluggish thinking, causing difficulty to concentrate, causing headaches and migraines, causing vision disruption and eye problems, causing eye pain, causing the formation of cataracts, causing head or chest pressure, causing difficulty in breathing, causing mood disorders, causing exhaustion and chronic fatigue. These psychotronic projections are carried out by electronically modulating analog brain EEG signals and commands that are piggybacked on a certain pulsed microwave frequency that causes rapid thermal expansion in the side of the brain or inner ear, which then transfer that EEG information to the brain of the targeted person. However, to induce all of these effects in a single targeted victim alone in the midst of a group of very closely located crowd of people, requires a brain radio type electrode chip implantation in that victim, where the transmissions are made via the mobile or satellite telecommunication network using a binary digital signal in a similar way to connecting to a digital mobile telephone handset. Now let's continue looking at the rest of the effects and conditions that can be artificially induced in the victim by the use of the Psychotronic electronic harassment weapon control system. Causing a wildly racing heart without a cause that could explain it to make the victim feel panicked. Forced muscle quaking of the large muscles on the back or other unexplainable vibrations causing the victim to feel stressed. The psychological operatives conducting the remote electronic psychotronic harassment are trained to pay what they term as special attention to the victim's genital area and cause itching, a forced orgasm, intense pain, and hot needles-like sensations in that body area of the victim regardless whether they be females or males. This is to make the victim feel sexually raped and helpless, akin to actual physical sexual rape. Causing the victim to experience intense general pain, or hot needles pushed into flesh sensations, also described as stings when trying to sleep. And causing a sense of wild flailing, which is sometimes followed by short periods of rigor mortis-like sensations. One of the unique features of the sleep prevention function of the electronic harassment weapon is that it is typically carried out at precisely the same time, night after night for weeks or months, almost to the second. This feature can be automated with the AI routines. The sleep prevention and deprivation function is designed to make the victim tired and run down and eventually enter a semi-sleepy and hypnotic state due to intense brain fatigue. This would make the victim more suggestible and open to programming or depatterning. The victim experiences vivid controlled dreams, which is part of the dream manipulation mind control activities to reprogram the victim. The victim experiences projected forced visions whilst awake, with some of them synchronized with forced body motion. This is conducted by sending psychotronic EEG image data and commands to the victim's Brainradio electrode implant. The victim experiences forced memory blanking, where they forget their current train of thought, which result in induced erroneous actions, causing confusion in the victim and even accidents. Causing of forced manipulation of airways in the victim where they experience difficulty in speaking and breathing, including externally controlled forced speech, where a victim might appear to say something unintended in public, causing an impression of erratic behaviors. Causing forced movement of the victim's jaw and clacking of teeth, which might make others around the victim feel uncomfortable. Causing the victim to feel as they have transparent eyelids, which sometimes results in the victim feeling disorientation. Causing the victim to feel a sudden violent itching inside their eyelids, resulting in making them feel agitated and upsetting them. Causing a remotely induced violent no-rash itching, with a preference for hard-to-reach areas in the victim. Often carried out when the victim is doing delicate or messy work. This sensation in the victim is also described as shocks. Much of the itching is caused in hard-to-reach itch sites in the victim, both at the top and bottom. Usually there never is any rash, which often starts as the sensation of small electrical shocks. Causing a forced nudging of the victim's arm while they are doing delicate or messy work and causing injury or spills. Causing forced precision manipulation of hands, which is sometimes synchronized to the forced waking visions. The Psychotronic remote electronic harassment weapon system has a demonstration mode of its neurocontrol features, by bending each toe of the victim backwards to almost 90 degrees, one toe at a time over a couple of minutes. This is conducted by sending psychotronic EEG commands to the victim's Brainradio electrode implant. In many victims, causing of repeated fresh batteries in their wristwatch to die, causing the victim to keep buying new batteries. This is due to the microwave heating effect. Much of the remotely conducted electronic harassment activity is designed to simulate physical torture and appears to have been taken from actual physical torture methodology for degrading and breaking down the will of character in a person mentally and emotionally, leading to the physical running down of the victim's health into illness. The list of general effects that can be caused by the remotely controlled psychotronic electronic harassment weapon by also connecting to the victim's Brainradio implant are: the causing of a sudden overheating to the victim, the causing of a feeling of all-over body pain in the victim, the causing of a feeling of a sense of a forced caffeine jolt that causes sleep prevention, the causing of a forced almost immediate sleep inducement in the victim, the causing of the appearance of a severe distortion of facial features in the victim by induced facial muscle manipulation, the causing of actual physical microwave burns in the victim, the causing of electric shock sensations in the victim. This is then combined with organized stalking of the targeted victims to experience frequent break and entering at the victim's home and at the victim's place of work, with the victim's clothing and furniture, and business papers and computer files all being sabotaged or modified or stolen. This organized community harassment is carried out by the use of vicious lie campaigns to elicit the support of others to engage in the harassment of that victim. We can now take a look at how the surveillance and cognitive mapping of a targeted victim is covertly carried out in their home without their knowledge by the intelligence service with support from the police force. This illustration was originally released by the American Department of Homeland Security's Fusion Center in Washington State, in response to a Freedom of Information Act request, which has been animated and colorized here to aid easier comprehension. It depicts how usually a targeted individual's living quarters are covertly fitted up with wireless microwave-powered spy cameras, wireless microwave-powered microphones, connection relays, and hardware bugs that are secretly installed in the personal computers and in all electronic communication equipment owned by the targeted victim. You can see how most of the hidden devices are powered by transmitted microwave induction to evade general detection. Also, the mind control of the targeted victim is carried out using a hidden transmitter producing radio transmissions of neural broadcasts of mood propaganda to alter the victim's mood and instructional cognitive process EEG information to the victim's brain radio, neural telecommunication implant to control the victim's behavior. These hidden transceiver devices also connects to the victim's brain radio neural telecommunication electrode nasal cavity implant and other body implants. The target victim's brainwave EEG patterns are recorded, and the video images from the hidden spy camera and audio sounds from the hidden microphone are also recorded. These recordings, along with information received from the other hidden personal computer and communications equipment spyware bugs, are then relayed onwards to a GCHQ-managed artificial intelligence-based supercomputing data center for storage and later retrieval for interrogation and data mining. Additional spy-link relays may be hidden and fitted into the walls and furniture of the targeted victim's living quarters. Usually, a private neural telecommunications system connection transceiver antennas may be covertly fitted, so that the visiting psychological operatives and field agents in the neighboring apartments and buildings can connect in using a synthetic telepathy link using their portable wearable neural telecommunication headwear devices and their customized software-based interactive mobile communication devices, for performing control operations, which are managed by the IT and telecommunications staff at GCHQ. In the UK, this covert fitting up of a victim's living quarters was usually carried out in the past by MI5 departments that were referred to as Departments S1 and S2. Obviously, these covert technological spying devices, small wearable covert neural interfacing technological devices, portable directed energy weapons and all of their related peripheral equipment and software versions are being improved all the time, with newer, smaller and more portable upgraded models being designed and produced with newer software revisions, and then being deployed to be tested at these sites of non-consensual experimentation on targeted victims regularly, to perfect and ensure that these covert technology ordinarily evades generating any suspicion, or being easily detected and being found out by the targeted person or the casual investigator. So let's take a look at a high-level schematic diagram which provides an overview of the working of the synthetic telepathy infrastructure. The diagram shows an overview of how remote neural monitoring and tracking telemetry with psychotronic technology functions across a computerized wide-area electronic telecommunications network as implemented in the UK. It also facilitates remote mental torture and electronic harassment. You can see how the radio telemetry from the victim's body implants is received by the ground-based ordinary mobile telecommunications network base station antennae and the Earth-orbiting satellite network, and then transmitted to the listening stations. From there, this telemetry data is forwarded onto a vast computerized artificial intelligence-based monitoring system running on a GCHQ-managed supercomputer, where the victim's thought and speech vocalizations, mental and visual imagery and sensory information are captured, identified, indexed, and stored in a large database where data mining and analysis operations can be carried out. The captured information is analyzed by artificial intelligence algorithms, and live narrations and condensed reports are generated automatically. These narrations and report streams are forwarded automatically via encrypted communication systems with customized software and interactive devices that are managed by the IT and telecommunications staff at GCHQ. They manage and facilitate this covert detection, monitoring, and transmission of information from targets over vast geographical areas of space quickly. We can now take a look at how remote brain mapping and remote mind control operations are carried out by agents acting under the umbrella of our government intelligence agencies and which are also being supported by our police force. This illustration was originally released by the American Department of Homeland Security's Fusion Center in Washington State, in response to a Freedom of Information Act request, which has been animated and colorized here to aid easier comprehension. It depicts the various methods used to remotely conduct individual human brain mapping and then carry out remote mind control operations using psychotronic weapons by the intelligence services. The methods depicted here are, firstly, to remotely carry out mind control operations of mass populations and of individual persons using mobile communication cell towers, and also using individual mobile phone handsets to act as relay antennas. Secondly, to remotely carry out mind control operations of individual persons, using specially fitted mobile psychotronic weapon carriers, disguised as communications vehicles. Thirdly, to remotely carry out mind control operations of individual persons and groups of people, using black or unmarked helicopters, or drones, that are specially fitted for carrying psychotronic weapons. Fourthly, to remotely carry out remote mind control operations of individual persons, using transportable psychotronic weapons and devices, by placing field agents and operatives in neighboring homes and buildings to where the targeted person resides. In the UK, these operations are carried out by field agents operating under the umbrella of our domestic intelligence agency MI5 with the cooperation of the British Police Force. We can now take a brief look at the UK hub of the ECHELON Global Electronic Communications Surveillance and Human Brain Mapping and Psychotronic Control Ecosystem. The diagram depicts an overview of one of the main hubs of the ECHELON Global Human Electronic Communications and Psychotronic Brain Surveillance Ecosystem that is located in Menwith Hill in Yorkshire. From here, mass remote mind control is deployed for blanket coverage of the UK population via our mobile telecommunications network. The British GCHQ and the American NSA are in a closely joint partnership, and they share a vast electronic computerized mass surveillance network infrastructure, with common shared vast mass human population surveillance information supercomputing data centers. The global span of the ECHELON surveillance network with its Dragnet-style bulk data collection subsystem of the American PRISM communications interception system and the British Spectra data mining and interrogation technologies ties in all companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook and other electronics communications and telecoms providers into its vast surveillance network. The ECHELON Global Electronic Communications Surveillance and Psychotronic Control Network was developed by the Five Eyes Alliance, which is comprised of the American NSA, British GCHQ, Australian ASD, Canadian CSE, and New Zealand's GCSB working together with NATO. Its capacity to capture satellite, radio, fax, internet, and all other types of electronic communications, including human brain psychotronic traffic worldwide, allows for strategic and tactical intelligence on human targets. In the context of organized harassment, ECHELON serves as the global collection and monitoring component of the global human surveillance grid ecosystem.
Now let's take a look at this British intelligence agency supported and run targeting criminal enterprise in the UK. The chart provides an overview of how organized stalking and electronic harassment of a victim is used as part of the full targeting criminal enterprise's activities. Following and terrorizing the victim, spreading rumors, sabotage of property and staged break-ins are among the long list of stalking activities. Remote electronically managed assaults and harassment include sleep deprivation, pain inducement, involuntary bodily jerking and movement, causing prickly and burning sensations. Additionally, voice projections and mental visual projections are regularly and intermittently carried out to upset the victim. The victim is also subjected to various mind control programs with dream manipulation, mood alteration, memory blanking, and urge induction. This chart provides an overview of how the mind-controlling agent gets feedback information from the targeted victims. It illustrates the disparity and repression of a targeted victim. You can see that the mind controllers and their collaborators are employed, with what could be considered a good salary and even with pension schemes, to attack and harass their victims with their own thoughts. They act with Nazi-like behavior, with many having full knowledge of the targeting system. Victims, on the other hand, feel isolated and helpless, suffering mentally and physically. Since the victim's thoughts are being captured and read, they cannot have any privacy of thought and have any secrets. Their intellectual property and any trade secrets that they may possess are read and stolen. Victims are falsely accused of mental illness and usually cannot escape the harassment and torture. The chart shows how psychological torture and mind control is inflicted on a watch-listed targeted individual using trauma as a inducing method known as Monarch programming. This inhumane methodology is used with the American FBI-developed COINTELPRO tactics and utilizes psychotronic technologies. The targeted victim is made to feel confused and then terrorized with organized stalking and street theater. They are then interrogated using voice-to-skull technology, and the victim's responses are read using remote neural monitoring and synthetic telepathy technology with the use of a previously implanted Brainradio type neural communication electrode implant. They are then reprogrammed for behavior modification with dream manipulation by visiting psychological operatives and field agents by connecting to the victim's Brainradio implant. The goals and outcomes sought by the mind-controlling perpetrators usually are to get the watchlisted targeted victim to act irrationally in public and have a falsely constructed psychiatric assessment. Also, if possible, to then get that targeted victim locked up in a mental health hospital. The main aim is to create a false track record of mental illness in the targeted victim, so that the victim is not believed if any complaints of harassment are raised by that victim. This ensures that the victim is made helpless and trapped in misery and suffering, where they can be continued to be harassed and abused with non-consensual experimentation with impunity. In some extreme cases, some of these falsely watchlisted targeted victims are brutally programmed by this form of mind control methodology, and then callously used for silent assassination methods and state-organized false flag violence and terrorism, to cause fear in the general public and generate public concern. This conveniently can then become an engineered platform to introduce tighter controls curtailing civilian freedom and further eroding human rights by a government that resorts to this form of draconian and authoritarian methods to impose its will on its citizens. See Section 1 and Section 2 in the main report, which details all of this in length. The chart shows how the UK NHS and psychiatry is weaponized and used against falsely watchlisted targeted victims of covert electronic harassment with psychotronic technology and directed energy-based neuro weapons, conducted under the COINTELPRO type state-organized stalking programs of government weaponization. You can see how when a victim of stalking and electronic harassment reports about their surveillance, stalking, hacked electronics, social sabotage, mobbing, an experience of Havana syndrome-like symptoms of psychotronic technology-based harassment, with directed energy-based neuro weapons, they are pathologized and gaslighted by the first responders or health practitioner who have been trained to suggest that the victim's issues are not organized crime, but rather a psychological issue, thereby misleading and directing subsequent investigative actions down a psychiatric path instead. If the victim accepts this initial false assessment, then they are institutionally entrapped with the use of an American DSM-style ready-made false psychological products catalog selected false psychiatric misdiagnosis of schizophrenia, psychosis or other delusional disorder. If the victim rejects that initial false assessment and denies being mentally ill, then every attempt is made to place them in an anosognosia trap, where the victim's denial is used as proof of illness. Then if the victim still continues to resist that false diagnosis and its related pacification medication, then it is interpreted as a denial of illness with hostility to treatment, and action is taken to hold the victim involuntarily. The victim is then falsely classified as a danger to themselves or a danger to society, and forcibly hospitalized and restrained and sedated using drugs. In either case, the targeted victim has now been medically and legally discredited by the NHS psychiatrists, and the targeted victim's real-world harassment has been falsely reframed as a mental illness by the state-run government weaponization program. It therefore can be seen how most of the psychiatric community who are ill-educated on this type of covert psychotronic harassment, and have been invariably coached and trained by their superiors who are colluding with these non-consensual experimentation programs, and are in the know, to diagnose the targeted victim with a constructed false psychosis or delusional disorder. It should be noted that psychiatry, unlike all other fields of medicine, has absolutely no basis in hard science. Since there is no laboratory test or MRI test to diagnose what is craziness or madness, clusters of behaviors are corralled into contrived categories and then given big medical-sounding names to simulate a diagnosis, which in actuality is a fabricated, falsely constructed complete misdiagnosis. The majority of psychiatrists in the UK continue to refer to and blindly pick a ready-made diagnosis from an American DSM-style published mental condition products catalog manual, much like selecting an outfit from a costume fashion catalog to dress up their victim patient. The diagnoses published in these DSM-type manuals are made by a group of psychologists by voting on the best diagnosis product description during their meetings arranged to create the range of psychological products for that edition of the Psychological Condition Catalog collection. This is not science. Unlike medical diagnoses that convey a probable cause, appropriate treatment, and likely prognoses, the disorders listed in this type of manual are on terms arrived at through peer consensus. This actually has the effect of diverting attention and resources away from the legitimately ill and toward people with the everyday problems of life who will be harmed, not helped, when they are mislabeled as mentally ill. Such is currently the case of victims of non-consensual experimentation in this country. Almost all of the victims that have complained of electronic harassment have eventually been seen by a psychiatrist who is more apt to medicalize them into the confines of that catalog description of the psychiatrist's chosen mental condition product rather than investigate the victim's claims of non-consensual experimentation and psychotronic harassment. Declassified American government-released documents reveal that the American CIA arranged for the inclusion of intentionally induced mimicry of mental illness symptoms in their American DSM manual by famous psychologists on their payroll. It appears that the American DSM manual was intentionally set up to be able to sidetrack any truth about non-consensual experimentation from being found out and create false mental illness diagnoses as a smokescreen for the illegal COINTELPRO psychotronic operations. So, clearly the American DSM-type product catalog manuals for mental disorders is more of a political document, meant to mislead doctors to falsely diagnose mental disorders. Because the practice of psychiatry is pharmaco-financially driven in complete partnership with the pharmaceutical industry, the victim is found within the artificial parameters of ready-made mental condition product descriptions picked from a DSM-type catalog, and placed in false and unnecessary medical treatment programs, where further experimentation on the victim is then conducted. The eventual discreditation of the targeted victim, through the false diagnosis of a mental disorder, is probably the ultimate intended goal of the perpetrators running this illegal program. These manufactured mental illnesses continue to be an important mechanism in use to crush and silence targeted individuals of various minorities. The topic titled "The Mind Doctors, Psychiatrists, Psychoanalysts, and Psychologists" in the main report covers these psychiatric practices in detail.
So let's take a look into how usually a non-consensual experimentation laboratory is typically brought and set up around the home of an unwitting targeted victim without their knowledge. This illustration conceptually shows how an example live targeting operation is used for training psychological operatives and field agents and for the testing of directed radiation energy-based neuro weaponry. If the targeted victim lives in an apartment or housing complex adjoining each other, where neighboring apartments or houses are separated with only walls, ceilings, or floors, then directed energy-based neuroweapons can be easily deployed for non-consensual experimentation and testing of these devices to maximum effect for the military and intelligence services. In this example, the targeted victim lives in an apartment on the first floor of that apartment building. A couple of field agents are placed in the apartment below the victim's apartment with microwave and X-ray-based radar equipment and directed energy weaponry that requires testing for the military by contractors. Another couple of psychological operatives are placed in the apartment immediately above to monitor, surveil and control the targeted victim surreptitiously using ultra-wideband radar viewing devices and other spy technological devices. These psychological operatives also then use EEG cloning and voice-to-skull technology with remote neural monitoring systems to conduct dream manipulation and interrogate, harass, and record the victim silently through the night using no-touch torture tactics. Also in this example, another field agent has been placed in the upper apartment as the site and operations manager for facilitating this virtual laboratory of non-consensual experimentation. Sometimes, field agents also may be placed in the adjoining neighboring building after obtaining cooperation from those neighbors. Additionally, other operatives using a clandestine vehicle may occasionally park themselves outside the targeted victim's apartment building to carry out further testing, experimentation, and surveillance training. Microwave and X-ray-based directed energy neuro weapons, which have been developed by defense contractors for the British military and police force, which uses modulated beams of microwaves and X-rays that can travel through walls, ceilings, and floors towards a target victim and are designed to bathe that targeted victim's living quarters with microwave and X-ray radiation, are used and tested to heat the victim's blood in a rhythmic pulsing pattern whilst they are asleep. This entrains and synchronizes the target victim's brainwaves to a trained psychological operative's brainwaves. This temporary alignment and synchronization of brainwaves, which permits a temporary joining of the two minds, is known as EEG cloning. The operative can then connect to the victim's Brainradio neural telecommunication electrode implant and view the target's dreams with specially designed wearable neurological headgear and influence them through suggestion and projecting computer-generated synthetic dream sequences to the victim. A whole catalogue of functions of remote radiologically inducible physical and psychological effects and conditions that can be carried out with the Psychotronic remote neural monitoring technology equipment, and small portable directed energy weapons are tested for that particular current equipment model, so that they can be passed as being fully tested and operational for the British military, police force, and intelligence services. The same microwave and X-ray based devices can be used to cause discomfort, pain, and even burns in a targeted victim, eventually causing a damaged nervous system, various types of cancers, and even death with regular prolonged exposure to its radiation over time. These usually uncommon, but radiologically induced rare neurological and cancerous physiological disorders in these victims, then open up further avenues of opportunity for our National Health Service for conducting further experimentation to test and perfect various experimental treatment procedures and new drug treatments, including psychiatric drugs, for the pharmaceutical industry partners, where otherwise the availability of suitable human test subjects would be a scarcity. The victim is eventually forced to leave their home by the psychological operatives by intensifying the electronic harassment and the use of microwave-directed energy weapons with the assistance of the field operatives that are placed in the neighboring apartments and buildings, by causing actual physical bodily harm and making it completely intolerable and unbearable to the victim. This often results in the victim becoming homeless and destitute and sometimes falling victim to outside criminal activity and sometimes resulting in the death of that victim. Or in some extreme cases where the victim is driven to commit suicide. In most cases, however, if the victim moves home, then it provides new opportunities for the intelligence agency psychological and field operatives to train and test new spycraft and tactical skills in the tracking and reacquiring of the targeted victim once the victim has moved, and then the setting up of shop again, with another clandestine non-consensual laboratory setup at the victim's new home location. Even if it happens to be in another Western democratic country, through the use of secret surveillance and watchlist sharing partnership treaties with those countries to continue the electronic harassment of that victim. See the Additional Supplemental Information Report for further details of a similar actual live operational non-consensual laboratory setup as implemented around a particular targeted victim's apartment in the UK's capital city London.
Now let's meet the key experts and conscionable whistleblowers, who have worked steadfastly to inform and educate us on all of these hidden and secretly developed psychotronic mind control technologies. Dr. Rauni Kilda, who was the Chief Medical Officer of Northern Finland. She exposed the American FBI's COINTELPRO programs, organized community gang stalking operations, and the American CIA's Psychotronic remote neural monitoring and synthetic telepathy technology. Additionally, she also revealed that the COINTELPRO equivalent electronic harassment programs in Britain were run by the British intelligence agencies, and that the European Gladio operations was organized and run by NATO. Dr. Robert Duncan, who was an ex-CIA engineer and professor in physics. His whistleblowing revelations informed us about the various components of the synthetic telepathy technology infrastructure, and about the technological mind cloning capabilities of intelligence agency psychological operatives. Dr. Michael Persinger, who was a neuroscientist and biophysicist and also worked on CIA projects. He educated us on how a common consciousness can be shared by many individuals technologically, which is referred to as a hive mind, and also how the human mind can be reprogrammed radiologically whilst you are asleep, during the REM phases of a sleep cycle. Daniel ECHELON, who is an investigator and writer. He exposed the secret world of implants and the brainwashing and social engineering of society by British and American intelligence agencies. Also, that the Tavistock Institute, which was Britain's preeminent psychological warfare agency, had dispatched many of its top brainwashers to America to work on the secret mind control projects of the CIA and the Pentagon, including the MKUltra project. William Binney, who is an ex-NSA technical director. His whistleblowing revelations informed us about the covert implanting of mind control chips in American civilians, and about the global surveillance by the American NSA using the ECHELON global surveillance network. Christopher Simpson, who is an academic writer and associate professor of communication at the American University in Washington, D.C. He educates us on the American CIA's covert program, codenamed Operation Paperclip, which secretly liberated and recruited 1,600 Nazi German scientists and doctors, including some of Adolf Hitler's closest collaborators, including men responsible for murder, slavery, and human experimentation, including men convicted of war crimes, to live and work in the USA on eugenics, chemical and biological warfare agents, hallucinogenics, and mind control with CIA subsidies, under the umbrella of their mind control project, codenamed MKUltra. Dr. Barry Trower, who is a British physicist and a military scientific advisor on radiation. He informed and warned us on the dangers of microwave radiation and microwave-based weapons technologies in Britain. Additionally, on the various type of psychotronic chip implants and how they are activated by microwave beams. Dr. John Hall, who is a board member of ECOACT and member of the Mind Science Foundation. He exposed the secretive world of gang stalking and educated us on the historical beginnings of the American CIA-originated programs of radiological mind control operations. Dr. James Giordano, who is a neuroscientist and U.S. Pentagon and DARPA advisor. He educates us on the current high-tech nanoscale microchip mind control and sensor technology and biotechnology developed by their American DARPA military research team for modern warfare. Dr. Catherine Horton, who is an Oxford-educated particle physicist and worked at the European Organization for Nuclear Research in Geneva, Switzerland. She exposed how British intelligence and various European intelligence agencies and police forces uses organized stalking and electronic harassment using radiological weapons technology to intimidate and silence people. Edward Snowden, who is an ex-NSA technical analyst and worked for the CIA, his now world-famous whistleblowing revelations informed and educated us on the global span of the ECHELON surveillance network and its Dragnet-style bulk data collection subsystem of the American PRISM communications interception system and the British Spectra data mining and interrogation technologies. He revealed that the American NSA and the British GCHQ are in a closely joint partnership, and that they shared a common shared vast mass surveillance information database, and shared electronic computerized mass surveillance network infrastructure. He also exposed how all companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, and other electronics communications and telecoms providers are tied into the ECHELON global surveillance network. Dr. Thomas Zaz, who was a professor of psychiatry emeritus. He educates us on the abuses committed under the guise of mental health and the unethical practices of psychiatry, with the myth of mental illness, and also that psychiatry is not medicine, but a pseudoscience. He also enlightens us on how psychiatry is actually used as a political tool by the state for behavioral control of the population through the weaponization of mental illness.
When the atrocities committed by Nazi Germany became fully apparent after the Second World War in the 20th century, the consensus within the world community was that it was necessary to create a universal declaration that specified and enshrined the rights and freedoms of all human beings. So let's now remind ourselves of that covenant by looking at some of the important articles that form the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 1 states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Article 2 states that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing or under any other limitation of sovereignty. Article 3 states that everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of person. Article 4 states that no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Article 5 states that No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 8 states that everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. Article 9 states that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Article 12 states that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. Article 18 states that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Article 19 states that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Article 20 states that everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. No one may be compelled to belong to an association. Article 21 states that everyone has the right to take part in the government of his country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. Everyone has the right of equal access to public service in his country. The will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. This will shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections which shall be by universal and equal suffrage and shall be held by secret vote or by equivalent free voting procedures. Article 22 states that everyone, as a member of society, has the right to social security and is entitled to realization, through national effort and international cooperation and in accordance with the organization and resources of each state, of the economic, social, and cultural rights indispensable for his dignity and the free development of his personality. Article 23 states that everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work and to protection against unemployment. Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. Everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity, and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests. Article 24 states that everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. Article 25 states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including foods, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control.
The first ever international neuro-rights standard-setting instrument on the ethical principles of neurotechnology was introduced by the United Nations at the UNESCO 43rd General Conference in Samarkand. It is worth observing, as it is hoped that all member states of the United Nations will adopt all these recommendations, with no attempt to dilute, curtail, or remove the level of protections that is entailed therein by any authoritarian member states that employs psychotronics as a governmental weapon to oppress and control their population. These new recommendations currently has 166 items, of which some of the important specified protections are highlighted here as follows. Item 40 states that neurotechnology should contribute to human health and well-being without causing avoidable harm, whether physically, economically, socially, politically, culturally, or mentally. The do no harm principle must guide the whole life cycle of neurotechnology in order to promote and protect the quality of life. Item 43 states that, throughout the whole life cycle of neurotechnology, the protection and promotion of the rights of autonomy and freedom of thought must be secured, and mental and physical integrity should be protected from any unwanted and harmful interference. Item 47 states that neurotechnology should never be used to exert undue influence or manipulation, whether through force, coercion, perception of disadvantage, social pressure, or other means that compromise autonomy and freedom of thought. This protection should cover both the internal processing of thoughts and their external expression. Item 49 states that privacy, including mental privacy, is fundamental for personal identity and agency, as well as for the protection of human dignity. The collection, processing, modification, and sharing of neural data, as well as indirect neural data and non-neural data allowing mental states inferences require prior, free and informed consent of the person concerned, with the exception of life-threatening medical emergency situations, as recognized in international frameworks, in ways that safeguard and respect international law, including international human rights law, and the values and principles outlined in this recommendation. Item 56 states that member states should ensure that those who suffered harm by neurotechnology have timely access to justice and effective remedy. They should work together with all stakeholders to ensure that those responsible for these harms are held accountable. Item 58 states that all actors throughout the whole life cycle of neurotechnology should ensure that their activities are transparent, safe and secure, grounded in scientific evidence, and aligned with international principles of responsible conduct and scientific integrity, regardless of whether neurotechnology is used in medical contexts or non-medical contexts, or when devices infer or interfere with mental states. This includes preventing the replication or amplification of biases, reinforcing the traceability and explainability of neurotechnology, and ensuring its capacities and limitations are accurately portrayed. The conditions for accountability are clearly defined, adhering to ethical guidelines in research and development, including in the use of neurotechnology for medical purposes, the registration of trials, fair participant selection and review or approval by independent ethics committees. Item 60 states that open and accessible education, along with public and community engagement, should be promoted to ensure that diverse populations can gain and exchange knowledge about nervous system functioning, mental health, medical and non-medical applications, and tools of neurotechnology, and to foster active participation of the society. Item 62 states that all communities should have a voice in decisions that concern them when it comes to neurotechnology, at all stages of its life cycle. Item 65 states that, in advancing responsible development and use of neurotechnology, particular attention should be paid to safeguarding the needs and preserving the interests of future generations. Item 75 states that, neurotechnology shall not be used for any kind of social control, attempts at coercive behavioral conformity based on personal beliefs or thoughts, political or other opinions, gender, or arbitrary and/or unlawful surveillance of mental states, as well as for torture or cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Item 76 states that member states should ensure that neurotechnology is developed and deployed responsibly, with respect for international human rights law, with robust independent oversight mechanisms to foster adherence to these restrictions and protect privacy, including mental privacy and freedom of thought for all individuals. These policies should be developed in inclusive dialogue with diverse actors, including civil society, end users, neurotechnology experts, ethicists and human rights defenders, to ensure broad consensus and respect for international law, including international human rights law.
We can now examine our long-cherished democratic rights and freedoms of Britons. Britain has willingly signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights, United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and created the British Human Rights Act 1998. The British Constitution believes that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of person. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home or correspondence, or to attacks upon his honor and reputation, Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work and to protection against unemployment. No one shall be subjected without his free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. Everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing or in print, in the form of art, or through any other media of his choice. Additionally, the right to privacy grants British citizens to live in their homes without interference from the government. Citizens may develop close relationships with whom they wish, whether they be social or sexual. The right to undress and bathe oneself in a dignified fashion goes without debate. We are private individuals and, in our element, when we have unlimited control of our environment. We may control who enters our house, may divulge information about ourselves in private conversation, and dictate what we wear and eat. The right to personal autonomy, to develop personal interests, dictate life's direction and seek stimulus are major components of a healthy, balanced mental state and contributes to the overall well-being of our nation.
So, how have we done in fostering and fashioning a cool Britannia for the 21st century? The United Kingdom have always strived to project an image of an open and accepting society, where our democratically elected leadership is entrusted with effective transparent governance and effective mechanisms of public oversight. Representing the diverse multi-ethnic, multi-faith and multicultural modern society we have grown to become. However, whilst we recognize that the United Kingdom needs to maintain a competitive advantage in the rapidly evolving fields of brain and neurotechnological interfacing technology and AI-based cyber technology in the 21st century. Especially with the emergence of quantum computing technology, it's absolutely vital that such research and development in these fields are pursued ethically with absolute moral integrity and great caution. And placing the future welfare of our nation with cognitive liberty and mental privacy firmly incorporated at its core. Therefore, we, the British public, would like to be assured that the upper echelons of our country's civil service, rather than continuing being a shining example to the world of how not to be, as it currently has obstructively been seen to have been, instead, choose to be avant-garde by introducing bold new neuro rights legislation, completely guaranteeing cognitive liberty and mental privacy. So that we can then take pride with the expectation that our country's elected leadership, security agencies and public health institutions are diligently delivering the duty to the nation that they have undertaken, in the clear cognizance that they are in the service of their ultimate employer, the citizen public of the United Kingdom.
Now we can take a look at the recommendations we are making to the UK government. The main aim of this video presentation was to inform you on what are undoubtedly scandalous revelations of how cutting-edge high-tech nanotechnology-based psychotronic mind control neurotechnology and directed energy weapons are being tested non-consensually on unwitting victims of our general public, and then being secretly rushed into deployment by our military and intelligence services and police force, without any public consultation, scrutiny or authorization. It should therefore be quite obvious that these atrocities being perpetrated by our own intelligence agencies and police forces should be brought to an end through the introduction of tough new Neurorights legislation. This urgent need is especially amplified now that the commercial sector also has begun producing various neurotechnological products at an entry level, with no safeguards or oversight whatsoever. Therefore, the main report strongly recommends that the following 5 requirements, as outlined under Section 5 of the report, be urgently implemented at this outset without any further delay. The first requirement is that new neuro rights with data sovereignty legislation completely guaranteeing cognitive liberty and mental privacy should be passed, to specifically criminalize and ban all aspects covering unethical, unregulated development and non-consensual testing of brain and neurotechnological interfacing implant technology, AI-based psychotronic cyber technology, and directed energy neuro weaponry. The second requirement is that a complete overhaul of the country's justice system, to enable and empower it to thoroughly pursue all avenues of investigation, into complaints by victims of this form of psychotronic mind control technological torture or harassment. The third requirement is that the police and other law enforcement agencies need to be educated, trained, and equipped for detecting these new types of psychotronic cybercriminality, and the legislature relating to it, for better empowering them in combating this growing high-tech criminal industry, and not to instead aid and abate these criminals, by acting in collusion with its facilitating and perpetrating parties, as they have been doing previously. The fourth requirement is that new policies be introduced through the Department of Health, in line with the new legislation, to make it an absolute requirement that all public health and mental health practitioners are fully educated and updated on these new types of psychotronic neurotechnological surgical implants and directed energy weapons, so that they are better prepared to provide real effective assistance, support, and treatment to victims of these crimes, and not to cover up instead. The fifth and important requirement is that a government-sponsored public awareness scheme be implemented to better alert the general public in relation to these types of crimes, ensuring that they are better informed, and enabling the public to take sufficient precautionary measures to keep themselves protected from these new psychotronic and directed energy neuro weaponry. Therefore, it is hoped on behalf of the thousands of targeted victims in the United Kingdom, who have endured and still continues to endure this form of torture, that these 5 requirements as recommended in the main report be urgently implemented, hopefully bringing some long overdue justice and respite to these victims.
It's the annual Targeted Individuals Day again, on the 29th of August. The London rally to commemorate Targeted Individuals Day will be taking place outside number 10 Downing Street, as previous years. This is an annual peaceful rally where all targeted individuals and their supporters are welcome. It is hoped that the rally is a success in its aim of raising awareness, solidarity, and support for the victims and survivors of government weaponization and state-sponsored non-consensual experimentation. So, we hope to see you there.
Thank you for your time and showing interest in this urgent campaign to bring about awareness and change on behalf of the thousands of victims of targeting and non-consensual experimentation in the United Kingdom. This presentation was prepared through direct first-hand experience by Mr. R.G., who has been a targeted individual and a victim of government weaponization with non-consensual experimentation since before 2016. During this period, he had been non-consensually implanted with a Brainradio type neural communication spike electrode implant and then subjected to the testing of the entire catalogue of the various psychotronic harassment and torture weapons functions and settings, along with his flat being secretly fitted up with all the spy devices and antennas. Additionally, directed energy weapons and voice-to-skull devices had also been tested at his place of residence, through the clandestine use of neighboring apartments and buildings, as presented in this video. As has been shown in this video, 2 fundamentally important legal and ethical lines had been crossed in relation to the targeting of Mr. R.G. Firstly, his human rights and the sanctity and sanctuary of the personal private mental space of the mind was invaded and violated. Secondly, Britain as a parliamentary democracy, where the ultimate authority of its citizens with the accountability and authority that has been entrusted to its legitimately elected leadership of government, had been usurped and undermined by the British police, acting under the direction of the British version of a military-industrial complex that's driven by the UK Ministry of Defence and its intelligence arm MI5. Proved by their very act of obstructing Mr. R.G.'s letters of complaint about his targeting to the UK Prime Minister and other senior members of the UK Parliament, on not just one but on 3 separate occasions. Therefore, it is the hope of Mr. R.G. that by the publication of this video to educate the public and expose British institutional corruption and wrongdoing, will encourage the outcome of the United Nations recommended Neurorights framework to be fully incorporated into British legislation, ensuring that further human rights violations and abuses by the United Kingdom state-run institutions are brought to an end, and any further such violations are entirely held to account and firmly dealt with.